My identical twin sister stole my identity and took out thousands in loans under my name. My dad kicked me out without believing me. But when I showed up at Grandma's birthday with proof and exposed her in front of the entire family, her face said it all. I'm 26 years old. I work at a clothing store in the city. And I need to tell this story because what my sister did to me basically destroyed my life for almost a whole year. And until a few months ago, I didn't know if I was going to be able to recover from it. I guess I should start at the beginning. I mean, not the very beginning, but the moment when everything went to hell, which was when those court papers arrived at my father's house. It was a normal Tuesday, I think, or maybe Wednesday. I'm not sure. But what I do remember perfectly is that I was in my room getting ready to go to work. At that time, I worked at a coffee shop near my father's house, where I still lived. And I heard my dad, Peter, screaming my name from downstairs. It wasn't a normal scream like, "Come help me with something." It was one of those screams that gives you goosebumps because you know something is very wrong. I ran down the stairs and found him in the living room with a bunch of opened envelopes in his hand, and his face was completely red, like I had never seen him that furious in my entire life. He started yelling at me about what the hell I had done. How was it possible that I had been so irresponsible? And I was standing there, not understanding anything, literally nothing, because I had no idea what he was talking about. He threw the papers at me, and when I picked them up from the floor, I started reading, and I felt like the ground was opening up beneath my feet. They were court orders, debt notifications, lawsuits for defaulting on loan payments that, according to those documents, I had requested in recent months. There were like 5 or 6 different loans, from different banks and credit unions, and the amounts were insane. I'm talking about thousands and thousands of dollars in total. I tried to explain to my father that I had never requested those loans, that I didn't even know what those papers were talking about, but he didn't want to listen to me. He yelled at me that he couldn't believe I was such a liar, that he had raised me better than that. How could I think of taking out loans I couldn't pay and ruining my credit that way? And I kept telling him, "Dad, seriously? I didn't do this. There must be a mistake." But he just shook his head and told me to shut up, that he didn't want to hear more lies. The thing escalated so fast that I still have trouble processing it. My father told me I had an hour to pack my things and get out of his house, that he wasn't going to have someone living under his roof who was so irresponsible and lied to his face. I tried to reason with him. I begged him to listen to me, to let me investigate what had happened, but nothing worked. He was completely closed off, convinced that I had committed some kind of fraud or had been incredibly stupid with money, and there was no way to make him change his mind. I went up to my room crying. You know, that kind of crying where you can't even breathe well because you're in total shock? And I started throwing things into a suitcase without even thinking about what I was grabbing. I called a couple of friends, but nobody could help me at that moment. And it's not like I had many close friends back then, to be honest. In the end, I packed what I could in 2 suitcases and a backpack, and I left the house where I had lived my whole life without having any idea where I was going to go. I should mention that I have an identical twin sister, Adrienne, but at that time she didn't live with us. She had moved to the city like 2 years before to work at I don't know what, marketing or something like that, she said, and we saw her rarely, maybe once or twice a month when she came to visit. We always had a weird relationship. You know, like we were twins, but we weren't close at all. And in fact, sometimes I felt like Adrienne had some envy or resentment toward me for things I never really understood. But anyway, at that moment, I didn't even think about her. I was too busy trying not to collapse completely. I ended up staying at a cheap motel the first few nights, spending the little savings I had, and desperately looking for a place to live and a job in the city. Because obviously I couldn't stay in town after what had happened. I got a small room in a kind of ugly building, sharing with 2 other girls who were never there, which was perfect for me because I didn't feel like socializing or explaining to anyone why a 26-year-old girl had just moved alone with 2 suitcases and the face of having been crying for a week. I found work at a clothing store in a mall. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the rent and gave me enough to eat. And that's where I met Iris, who basically became my savior, although she didn't know it at that moment. Iris had bright red hair, like dyed that fire red color you can see from far away, and she was super outgoing and friendly, the complete opposite of me at that point in my life. I was walking around like a zombie, doing my work, going back to my room, crying at night, trying to understand what the hell had happened with those loans. Like 2 months passed, I think, and I still had no answers. I had tried calling the banks that appeared in the documents, but it was super complicated because they asked for identity verification, And when I told them I hadn't requested those loans, they transferred me from department to department without solving anything. My father wasn't answering my calls or messages, and neither was Adrienne, because I guess my dad had told her his version of the story, and she had decided I was a horrible person. One day I was at the store super depressed, not even pretending to be okay, and basically tears came out while I was folding t-shirts. Iris noticed and took me to the back room and asked me what was wrong. And at first I didn't want to talk, but she was so insistent and so kind that I ended up telling her the whole story. I explained about the loans, about my father kicking me out of the house, the whole mess I was stuck in. Iris listened to me super attentively, and when I finished talking, she was quiet for a moment, like thinking, and then she said something that had never occurred to me. She asked me if I had siblings, specifically sisters, and I told her yes, that I had an identical twin. And she looked at me with wide eyes and said, "Kate, doesn't it occur to you that maybe your sister could be impersonating you?" I froze. I literally felt like someone had thrown cold water on me because that possibility hadn't even crossed my mind. I told Iris no, that was impossible, that my sister wouldn't do something like that. But even as I said it, I started to doubt. Iris told me we should investigate, that we should go to those banks and talk to the people who supposedly gave me those loans, because if someone had impersonated me, maybe the employees would remember her. And the next day, which was our day off, Iris and I went on like an investigation mission. We had the list of banks and credit unions from the court documents, and we decided to start with the one that was closest. I was super nervous, like I felt like I was going to throw up, but Iris was all excited, like we were in a detective movie or something. We walked into the first bank and asked to speak with someone about a loan. An older lady attended us, like 50 years old, and when she saw me, her face changed completely. She said, "Oh, Miss Reynolds, it's good that you came. We need to talk about the overdue payments." And I said, "Excuse me, but I've never been here before. I think there's a mistake." The lady looked at me confused and said that of course I had been there, that she herself had attended to me like 4 months ago when I applied for the loan. Iris asked her if she could show us the loan application documents, and the lady hesitated but finally agreed. She showed us a photocopy of an ID with my name, Kate Reynolds, and my date of birth. But when I saw the photo on the ID, I almost fell off my chair. It was Adrienne. It was clearly Adrienne. And although we were identical, I could notice the subtle differences. The way she did her makeup, how she styled her hair. But for someone who didn't know us, it was impossible to distinguish us. She also showed us the signature on the loan documents, and although it wasn't exactly my signature, it was similar enough to go unnoticed. I felt a mixture of relief and absolute fury. Relief because I finally had proof that I hadn't done this, and fury because I couldn't believe that my own sister, my twin, had betrayed me that way. We went to 2 other banks that day, and the story repeated itself. At all of them they recognized me, at all of them there were photos of Adrienne on fake IDs, at all of them there were loans that she had taken out using my name and my information. We asked the employees to let us take photos of those documents. Some said no, but others did let us. Especially when we explained the situation and we started putting together an evidence file. That night, I stayed awake until 3 in the morning, trying to process everything. I couldn't understand why Adrienne would do something like that. I started thinking about her lifestyle. How whenever we saw her, she had expensive clothes, a new car, a Honda Civic 2018, that according to her she had bought pre-owned but was clearly new. She always talked about the expensive restaurants where she went and the trips she took. I thought she just had a good job, but now everything made sense. She had been financing her life with fraudulent loans using my identity. I told Iris everything the next day, and she told me I needed to talk to a lawyer, that this was super serious, and that I could get into legal trouble if I didn't handle it well. I obviously didn't have money for a lawyer, but Iris knew someone, a guy named Elliot Hughes who was a friend of her family and who, according to her, could advise me for free or for little money. I met Elliot like a week later. He was a middle-aged man, maybe 45 or 50 years old, with kind of gray hair and an office full of law books that intimidated me a little. I showed him all the evidence I had collected, and he got super serious while reviewing everything. He explained to me that what Adrienne had done was called identity theft and fraud, that they were very serious criminal offenses, and that I needed to report it to the police and credit agencies as soon as possible. Elliot helped me prepare a statement and explained the legal process to me. He told me I could press charges against Adrienne, but that would mean she would probably go to prison, and he asked me if I was prepared for that. I honestly didn't know how to answer. On one hand, I was furious and wanted her to pay for what she had done to me, but on the other hand, she was still my sister, my twin, and part of me felt horrible guilt for considering putting her in jail. I decided that before going to the police, I needed to confront her, directly. I needed to hear from her mouth why she had done it. The problem was that Adrienne wasn't answering my phone calls or messages, probably because she knew something was wrong or because my father had told her not to talk to me. I needed to find a way to see her face to face where she couldn't run away. The opportunity came like 2 weeks later when my father posted on Facebook. Yes, my father uses Facebook. He's like 58 years old. That he was going to have a family reunion at his house for my grandmother's birthday, who was turning 80. It was perfect because I knew Adrienne was going to be there, and the whole family would also be there, which was important to me because I wanted everyone to know the truth, not just Adrienne and my father. I spent the next few weeks preparing. With Elliot's help, I organized all the evidence in a folder, including copies of the fake IDs, the loan records, the statements from the bank employees who had recognized me, everything. I practiced what I was going to say, like 1,000 times, with Iris, who insisted on accompanying me to the reunion for moral support. And the day of the reunion arrived and I was a bundle of nerves. I hadn't seen my father in months. I hadn't seen Adrienne probably in longer, and I had no idea how they were going to react. Iris drove to my father's house. He was too nervous to drive, and we stayed in the car like 10 minutes before going in while I tried to calm down. When we finally went in, the house was full of people. My uncles were there, my cousins, my grandmother obviously, and in the back I saw my father and Adrienne talking together. The moment my father saw me, his face changed completely. He turned pale and then red, and he started walking toward me with that expression that meant he was about to explode. He told me in a low but furious voice, what the hell was I doing there? That I wasn't welcome. To leave immediately, but before he could continue talking, I raised my voice and said, I need to talk to everyone. I need you to hear what I have to say. The room went silent, like when you turn off the music in the middle of a party and everyone turns to see what's happening. My father tried to interrupt me, but I kept talking. I said I had come to clarify something very important about the loans I had supposedly requested. I saw Adrienne in the back and her face went from confusion to panic in a matter of seconds. She knew exactly what was about to happen. I opened my folder and started showing the documents. I explained to everyone how those court orders had arrived, how my father had kicked me out of the house, how I had to move out alone and start from scratch. And then I showed them the photos of the fake IDs, the ones that clearly showed Adrienne impersonating me. The silence in that room was so heavy you could cut it with a knife. My grandmother put her hand to her chest. My uncles looked at each other, not knowing what to do. And my father stood paralyzed. Looking at the documents, Adrienne tried to say that was a lie, that I was making everything up, but her voice was shaking and it was obvious she was lying. I asked her directly, Adrienne, are you going to tell me in front of the whole family that you didn't take out these loans using my name? Are you going to tell me that these aren't photos of you on these fake IDs? She looked at me with pure hatred, and then she just turned around and tried to leave. But I wasn't going to let her get away that easily. I followed her to the parking lot, with Iris and my father behind me. In the parking lot, my father finally confronted her for real. He asked her if it was true, if she had been using her sister's identity to commit fraud, and Adrienne broke down. She started crying and saying she was sorry, that she needed the money, that things had gotten out of control. My father was in shock. I think he still couldn't process that one of his daughters had done something like that to the other. I told Adrienne she had 2 options. She could go with me to the police right then and confess everything, accept the legal consequences, or I was going to press charges on my own and she was going to end up in much worse trouble. I also told her she needed to pay back all the loans she had taken out in my name, every single one of them, and that she needed to work with me and my lawyer to clear my name and my credit history. Adrienne looked at me like she was expecting me to say I was joking, but when she saw I was serious, she just nodded. She agreed to everything. She said she was going to pay back the loans, that she was going to do whatever was necessary to fix the mess she had caused. I don't know if she said it because she really felt guilty or because she was afraid of going to jail, probably a mix of both things. The following months were a long and exhausting process. Adrienne had to sell her car. She had to move to a cheaper place. She had to get a second job to be able to pay all the loans. Elliot helped me file identity theft reports with the credit agencies and with the banks, and little by little, we started cleaning up my history. It was a process of almost 6 months, but eventually all the loans were marked as fraud and removed from my name. My relationship with my father was more complicated to repair. He apologized, eventually, but it was a lukewarm apology. Like, I'm sorry for not believing you. But the evidence seemed very clear. It still hurts that he didn't give me the benefit of the doubt from the beginning, that he automatically assumed I was guilty. We've been working on rebuilding our relationship, but it's not the same as before. It probably never will be. With Adrienne, the situation is even weirder. She kept her promise, paid all the loans, and cooperated with the entire legal process, but she has never really given an explanation of why she did it beyond that she needed the money. I've only seen her a couple of times since then, at unavoidable family reunions, and it's super awkward. We haven't had a real conversation about what happened, and I don't know if we ever will. The truth is, I'm still processing all of this. There are days when I'm fine, and there are days when I wake up angry and betrayed. Iris has become my best friend, practically my chosen sister. The irony is not lost on me. I'm still working at the clothing store, although now I'm assistant manager, and I moved to a better apartment like 3 months ago. My credit is finally clean. I can apply for things in my name without fear of being rejected for a history that wasn't mine. Last week, I got my first real credit card, in my name, with no fraud involved, and it was a strangely emotional feeling, like I was recovering my identity for real. Little things that most people take for granted now mean a lot to me. I don't know what's going to happen with my relationship with Adrienne in the long term. Part of me wants to forgive her and move on. But another part can't forget what she did to me, how she was willing to destroy my life to maintain her lifestyle. I guess that's something I'm going to have to work out over time. There's no easy answer. What I do know is that I learned a lot about who is really there for you when everything falls apart. I discovered that strangers can become family, that the people you trusted completely can betray you, and that at the end of the day you have to fight for yourself because nobody else is going to do it. It's not the prettiest lesson in the world, but it's honest, and that's enough for now.